Tape 5 with Miriam Borenstein, and it's March 25th, 1998.
In my back in Germany,
In which camp was this?
that was in in Landsberg Camp Lager 1, number 1. In my back there were two women's sisters. I should underline, two beautiful girls. The older one was, I think, 24, and the younger one must have been about 20 or so. And she was all gray, the older one. Gorgeous face, but salt and pepper hair. And I understand she got gray at 19, because, you know, the Lithuanian Jews went before us. We came in 44. They came probably in 42, 3. And these two sisters were very close, and where we worked outside, where I worked, one of the sisters worked also, and one assessment took a liking to her. And I don't know if he could have done anything. Occasionally I wouldn't see her. So I don't know whether she was with him or not. I cannot tell that. But somehow, I don't know, she seemed dressed better, and she had a turban on her head, and none of us did. And they said that there was a love affair going on between them, but I'm not so sure of that, because when we arrived in Lager 1, we found there 200 Lithuanian Jewish girls, and they were all shaven. Their heads were all shaven, I don't know, and one was like left some hair on top and shaven all around. So we all inquired why this is so. She was a phenomenon among all of us. So somebody told us that they found her with an SS man, and so they either sent him away or killed him or something. I wouldn't know, but they ridiculed her this way by shaving her head this way. So I don't know what this girl, one of the two sisters, how she conducted herself with this assessment out there in the forest. I don't know.
Did you ever see them together?
I've seen them, talking, but once an assessment talks to you in public, that's public. He wasn't allowed to make any gestures to her or anything like that. How far it went, maybe it was just rumors, I don't know, because you asked me, so, this is my answer to this here. Other than that, no. Nobody had anything to do with the SS, because they didn't have anything to do with us. They weren't allowed to talk to us, in fact. After all, they have to take care of themselves too, because the Germans, they didn't play around. So let's go back to the death march. So we marched out, we left the camps, and apparently...
What did you wear when you left?
Whatever I wore there, a dress, and I had some kind of a jacket too. And no, wait. I wore already a striped uniform here. I forgot about that.
Did you have any number?
I had a number here, but that number didn't mean anything, because when they took the jacket to be washed, they probably gave me a different number, so I don't really know. I would say no number as far as I was concerned.
Did you have any food for this march?
For this march, they gave us, like, for the day ration of bread, and they kept on giving us the bread and some margarine with it, and that's it.
What did you wear on your feet?
Wooden shoes, like the Dutch wear those wooden shoes.
What was the weather then?
The weather was spring weather. It was mixed. It was slush, and it was rain, and it was sunny, and it depends where we were. I remember one night we spent on a big hill very close to Austria, because actually Landsberg is near München, and that's part of what is it part of? Anyway, that's close to Austria. Bayern, it is. They call it the Bayern part of Germany, and we stayed overnight, and there was this much snow on the ground.
How many inches do you think that is?
That must have been about 3 inches of snow, and we just put down the blanket and we just dropped down there on the snow and everything and in the wet and whatever.
Who were you with when you marched?
I marched with somebody that became my friend to this day.
Who was this?
That is somebody. This is also an interesting story. I was liberated with her, but then somehow we got separated. Well, I don't know how I could tie this in, but it turned out that we were distantly related, and I didn't find out the whole time we were in camp and the whole time. And she was so good to me because when we arrived in Landsberg, then they divided us. They gave us the good jobs, because you asked before if there were any good jobs. So now I'm going to describe the good jobs. Were in the kitchen mainly. And her sister used to sneak away a piece of potato or some horse meat, and she used to give it to her sister, and she shared it with me. That was another miracle.
What was this friend's name?
Sarah
Last name?
Schaefer. And towards the end, I found out that this Sarah was related, because I said to her, I have an aunt in America and an uncle, and she asked me the name of my uncle, and I told her the name, which here they call themselves Jacobs, and when they arrived, they came here after the First World War. My aunt was a young girl. They got married here. And when I say to her, his name is Jacobs, so she says, oh, it's probably Yakubovich. And sure enough, and because when she told me the town she came from, oh, that's how we got to know. When I asked her, I says, Sarah, what town do you come from? And she tells me. I says, oh, I have an uncle, married to my aunt, the one in America. I said, he comes from Torn, and I tell her the name, and we connected. So her cousin, my uncle, was her cousin, and we were friends. And we were good friends, like I say, to this day. She called me because she was being interviewed recently, and she called me. She remembers less than I remember, so I had to, she kept me on the phone from Cleveland at least an hour, and I had to tell her what I remember. She was questioning me like, and
How did you help each other as friends?
She helped me mainly.
How?
Well, like I said, she shared what her sister stole from the kitchen. We didn't call that stealing. We called it organizing. But whatever, for a better term. I call it stealing. Whatever she stole, she gave to her sister. She put it inside her stockings, and when she brought it over, she shared it with me. So how can you forget something like that? So like I said, over the years, we're in touch, and we visit, and, things like that. And this march was very bad for everybody, because the men especially, they were already emaciated, and they couldn't take the march. Had they have left us intact in the camps where we were, probably those that were there would have survived. Like this, They were just falling like flies, you know.
What
The
happened?
women held up, and they could, some of them just couldn't hold up.
What happened to the people who couldn't keep up with this march?
They just stayed behind and they died. And as we marched, we saw others, you know, others before us that marched already that route. We saw some dead people.
Did you ever pass any civilians as you walked?
Yes.
Any reactions?
No.
Do they say anything?
No.
Do they give you any food?
Other than this Wehrmacht guy. And you know something? I must confess that I was really a Ganef. How should I say a Ganef? For instance, these engineers, where I was the putzfrau, you know, they used to leave their rucksack, you know, their, what do you call
Backpacks.
that? Backpacks. They used to leave them hanging there and go out in the field and do their engineering, and then come back for lunch. But I was so starved, and I was curious what he has there. I bet he has some food there. And I would find, I don't know, maybe it was even chazer, who knows? I mean, I just ate it, that's all. But after a while, they got wise to me. I said, okay, buddy, you got my number.
What
He
happened?
didn't say anything. He did not say anything to me, no.
How do you know they got
No.
wise?
Because they didn't leave it there no more. So nobody said anything. I didn't say anything to them. They didn't say anything to me. And I just did my job. And that was that. They never offered anything to me. Either their food was rationed too. The Germans already had rationed food especially towards the end like that, you know. So, but they weren't starving. We were starving, not they. And
Going back to the death march, how often would you rest?
we would rest every once in a while. You know why? Because they wanted to rest.
Do they walk with you or ride?
Yes. Yes, they had to.
What were the bathroom facilities?
The forest.
Did anyone escape?
No, not that I know of. I was not aware of anybody escaping because we already heard the cannons. We already heard the shooting.
What did you feel when you
And,
heard that?
Oh, it was like music to my ear. Oh, I must get back to something. We were working in this forest, okay? And then at that point, the English were bombing.
How did you
I found
know?
this out from my husband. Not the Americans. The Americans, I think, were bombing the big cities, but the small towns and so on, the English were bombing. Maybe they did later on or further. But all of a sudden, we would hear the sirens wailing like crazy, and they were saying, "Rouse, rouse, rouse, go into the forest." They didn't care that we shouldn't get killed. They didn't want to get killed. So they would, you know, yell and scream their heads off, you know, we should go. And we loved it. We just loved hearing the sirens. It was like the most gorgeous music. Then after a while, when it quiet down, we had to come out and continue what we're doing. But sometimes it happened twice a day. And of course, they didn't bomb any place around there. They mainly bombed other places, the cities and stuff. And the same thing wherever we were. When we heard that the cannons shooting, oh, it felt so good. We loved it. We loved hearing it, you know. This was already in Germany.
How long did you walk?
How long did I walk? If they sent us out, let's say, maybe the day after Pesach, which was like in April sometimes, and I was liberated May the 2nd. So we walked maybe 2-3 weeks, and then they caught up with us, the Americans. And I want to describe how they caught up with us. We were marching and marching and marching, And occasionally they would put us on open trucks, but that was just occasionally, mainly marching. And we were so exhausted, and somehow we got lost from one another. I mean, not got lost singularly, but the groups, you know, there was a group and there and there, and they stayed behind, they went forward. And we were like, let's say, about 50 of us in one group, and with a couple of SS men. And they were tired, and of course we were dead tired. And here, outside the town, there was a barn, you know, a summer barn where they store hay and everything. So he says, we're going to go over there off the road and over there, and we're going to rest there. So thank God, we say to ourselves, okay. So we rested there. There was some hay we spread on the ground, and we lay down. We just fell asleep like dead. We just died there like. Then, and all of a sudden, like late in the afternoon, somebody comes running towards us, a man, a Jewish man, somebody from the camps that went out at the same time marching with us. And he says, they're coming. I said, who's coming? He says, look, the Americans, the trucks, you see over there, they're coming. And we started running to the street, because after all, we were all the way in the way in the back and in the field.
Were the SS people still with you?
When we woke up, nobody was there. They were all gone. There were two of them, and they just disappeared. They weren't there, and we ran to the highway, and then we were greeting them, and we were screaming, and we were crying, and we were yelling, and we didn't know what the hell to do. And they were waving to us and everything. I don't know if they had the clue who we are or what we are out of Mars. Maybe we came, you know, in torn things, you know, out there. And that was the end. That's how we were liberated. And right away they took charge of us, some of them, because the convoys kept on coming and passing us by.
Do you know what division this was?
I don't know, have no idea. And they placed us, the bunch of us, they took us to town, and then they placed us there by some German, and we slept upstairs in the barn where the hay is, and the next morning we got up, and they gave us food, and some of the people got very sick after.
What did they feed you?
Excuse
What
me?
did they feed you?
Oh, some kind of hash and white bread, and I don't know. I don't even remember from their rations they gave us. I just remember we had plenty what to eat at that point.
Did any of the American soldiers talk to you?
Sure they did.
In what
Sure
language?
they did. We just couldn't understand the word, what they were saying. Would you like some more heat? Are you cold? Oh. They spoke to us. Here and there, there was a Jewish guy, and he spoke Yiddish, and he was interpreting everything.
Did he question you? Did he try to find out?
Sure, he questioned us, but he didn't know what to ask us. That was the problem. Either he was informed already, or maybe he had seen other refugees or camps. I don't know, but or maybe he just didn't have the vocabulary, because I mean, how much Yiddish does he have, for instance? They just didn't know enough. Some of them had a certain amount. I know my husband knew how to speak Yiddish, but I haven't met him yet. But the others, some spoke Yiddish well, but they kept moving on to different places. So here and there we would always find somebody. Then there were German soldiers, you should know, American Germans. I must tell you an incident. Um, from here, you know, they were constantly shifting us from one place to the other. At one point, they sent us to a different town, I don't remember, and they put us in a small hotel. We took over this little hotel, and we occupied it. We slept on the floors, and some had beds and whatever. And at one point, the German woman that was the owner of this hotel came with a German American who spoke perfect German. And he came with her, and he came up to this hotel, and he scolded us, and he says, "What are you doing to this place? Look what you're doing." He was telling us in German, and she was telling him what he should say. Okay, some of us understood German. I should say most of us. And we felt very hurt. Here we are, we were just liberated a few days ago, a couple of weeks ago maybe, and she has the audacity to tell us they took away everything from us.
Were you able to do anything about this soldier?
We couldn't do a thing about it. We couldn't speak English. We didn't know what to do, to whom to report. He was a single soldier who came with her, and the fact that he spoke German, so we assumed right away that he's a German American, and that was it. But I never forgot that incident. I was very incensed, and most of us were. All right, they left, and we tried to be a little bit more careful, but we took over the place. We had a kitchen, but we had nothing to cook. And we didn't give a damn what's happening to the place. Maybe some people did things they shouldn't have done. They didn't care. So that was another incident to describe. What else can I tell you?
Were you able to locate any surviving family members?
My family members? I met a man. He was from our town, even distantly related, and he for the first time told me that my mother died in Auschwitz. Up to that point, I had no idea really how she died, if she died, where she is, did she survive, didn't she survive? But he told me about it, and I believed him.
How did he know?
I don't know how he knew. I don't know. Maybe he told me he worked in Auschwitz, or because some men were working, you know, by the crematoria or seeing the crematoria. I just knew in Auschwitz the sky was always cloudy, and I had no idea why. I found out, of course, much later on, that the smoke was coming constantly from the crematoria, day and night, and big billowing smoke. Apparently, when I was in Auschwitz, I wasn't far from the crematoria. I was in the vicinity of the crematoria. So he just knew. He says, your mother and my mother died. He was a distant cousin. Your mother and my mother, they both died in Auschwitz, in the crematoria. So I was, I didn't know what to do. I mean, what should I cry or not cry? Oh, I was heartbroken. That was the end of that.
Did you ever return home?
I was going to, because after we were liberated, we really did not know what to do with ourselves. We were happy and we were extremely sad, because here we are, we're still young, but we have no parents, we have no siblings, we have no home. We don't know, should we go home, what should we do? In the meantime, they kept on shifting us from one place to the other. They kept on concentrating us, condensing, you know what I mean, bringing more and more survivors together into one place. They were probably more than one. who knows how many, but where I was, I noticed that they were bringing constantly more refugees, more survivors. And about 3 weeks later, after I was liberated, I met Irving. I met my husband.
How did you meet him?
How did I meet him? When we went to this place,
Which place?
a new place,
What was the name?
which was Freimann. It was outside Munich in called an area called Freimann. So there were barracks where the Germans used to shoot or train to shoot flak. You know what flak is? I hope you know, because I don't know. He told you. Anyway, so here I was. They assigned 4 or 5 girls to a room. We were sleeping 2 or 3 to a bed. And there I was. Still, what comes next from here? We stayed there for a week, 2 weeks. What are we doing? Where are we going? Where should we go? Where shouldn't we go? So we decided maybe we'll go to Israel, because I thought I had enough of anti-Semitism. Little did I know what's doing in Israel, the Arabs and all. So I was waiting around. We were all waiting around. And in this room in the morning, I was walking out. I was going someplace. It was a long corridor with lots of doors, with rooms. And in one of the rooms, I was with my friends. And I'm opening the door and I'm walking out, and I see my friend Magda is walking in with a soldier into our room. I was so annoyed with her. It was about 10 in the morning. Why was she bringing in soldiers? In fact, 2 soldiers, not 1, 2. Him and his friend. But I left. I went to meet somebody, a girl, I don't know. I came back and he is still there. So he says to me in Yiddish, "What is your name?" So I tell him my name, and I was glad that he can speak Yiddish. And he asked me where I'm from and this and that, and I don't know, just small talk. And he left. When he left with his friend, he told his friend, he says, "Did you see that, the black one?" My hair was still black. She says, what was I, in the 20s? He says, I'm going to marry that girl. I didn't know from anything, but from that day on, he kept on coming every day. I didn't know he's coming because of me. I was with 4 other girls, and one was extremely pretty. So I thought he's coming for Esther, No, I soon found out that he is interested in me, and he...
How'd you find that out?
I don't know. He asked me to go for a walk one of the times that he came. And we were talking, and I was kind of embarrassed to walk around with a soldier, So, but every day he can't, unless he was on guard duty. Otherwise, he came to the camps. Okay, he also became interested in other things I might underline. He was going to England on furlough, so he was interested in bringing Jewish paraphernalia to the refugees, like Talaisim and Svorim and the Tvilin. He was interested in doing this and talking, and he was holding speeches for them, and almost once a week or so he would hold what they call sicha, which is a lecture. He was lecturing our people because a lot of them wanted to go back to Russia. And he was trying to talk them out of going back to Russia. They should either come to America or go to Israel.
That's the end of our tape. This is tape 6. We're with Miriam Borenstein, it's March 25th, 1998. Could
Right.
you tell us your husband's name?
Irving Borenstein.
Tell us more about your dating.
And I don't know why he became interested in me. I didn't believe in the beginning. I didn't believe that he is interested in me. In fact, he was stationed nearby. He was, I don't know, he used to come around. Every day he would come from his place to, I have to remind myself at what point am I now. Uh, okay, I'm still in Freimann near Munich, where I met him. And
Did he ever question you about your experiences?
he questioned me superficially.
What was his background?
His background was a religious upbringing.
How did you deal with that?
Well, I didn't have to deal with it yet because I didn't think anything will become of our relationship, so I wasn't dealing with it at all. I was just, he would come pick me up and he would take me to these lectures, and my girls became a little bit jealous, and after a while they were talking about me, that I'm going around with a soldier, even though we had no privacy in the camps at all. It was just talking and maybe holding hands, and that's it. And that came much later. The girls didn't know what he was telling me, and I wouldn't tell them because I was embarrassed. I thought they'll make fun of me, that maybe I was affected in the camps, you know. So I didn't let on of our well, I don't know, is that a relationship? A certain type of relationship, you know, sitting outside on the bench and talking, and that was as far as it went. But he would ask me, would you like to come to America? And I say, why would I want to go to America? And whom do I have in America? I don't know. My aunt is old already, and 50 years to me then it was old, not now anymore. so I don't know, but I asked him that he should not he should not tell his mother or his sister, that's all he had, what he is telling me, because I don't want his mother to be aggravated that she might know I might be a shiksa or something like that. She might not believe him or whatever, and he was so young yet also, and
How old was he?
he was barely 21,
And you?
and so was I. We're the same age. And but you know, a woman is always more mature than a man. Anyway, but did he listen to me? No, he didn't listen to me. Not right away, but later on, he did write home about me, and I was very upset because some people in the family didn't say nice things about me. They didn't even know me, and they thought maybe he should give me some money, and so I let go of him, and I called him a dumb Yankee. I knew about Yankees, so I called him a dumb Yankee. Did you have to tell me this? I asked you not to tell your family. And then why do you tell me about it? I don't want to know about it. There's nothing between us. And all right, whatever he thought, I don't know whether he was sorry that he did or not, that I don't know. But eventually he became more serious, but then he was sent away.
What was your level of religious observance at this time?
Not much, but I always knew that once I'm settled, I'll pick up religion. I mean, I only wrote on Shabbos once throughout the time. Why? Because I still have the camp mentality. They said that in order to get ration cards, we have to come on Shabbos. So I listened to my friends, and I rode on the tram on Shabbos, and I regretted it ever since. And I thought to myself, I talked to myself, I say, are you crazy or something? You are free. You don't have to ride on Shabbos if you don't want to. You can make your own decisions now. So I never rode on Shabbos again, and I knew that I would be religious, you know. But they sent him back to a different place. He just was told to leave, and he was always a shrewdy. He was always very smart, and he maneuvered so that one day he came back. You know, like, what are you doing here? You know, I thought he left, and he told me, well, I have to go back. If I can, I'll write to you. If not, listen.
Did he write?
And I was not upset.
Did he write?
No, there was no mail going. It was right after the war, remember? And I was not upset because I didn't put any credence into this relationship. So, okay, so it was an experience. So what? You know. But then, after he came back, then we were already in steady contact. He took me away from there. On a truck, I went on a military. He arranged. Don't ask me how. He arranged for a military truck to take me to Fürth, where he was stationed. And there I had a little house to myself because they emptied out a Siedlung, they call it, an area, and the Germans, you know, went somewhere else, and they gave it to the Jewish people. And this was another concentration of refugees. But I didn't want to be alone in this little house because he was visiting. And so I figured people will talk, and you know, people are people all over. And we went back. Where my friend was. I knew where she was, the Sada, and we brought her over to me, and she stayed with me until I left for America. Well, not for America, for Belgium actually.
When did you get married?
Where? I got married here from this little house in Fürth. Incidentally, that's the town where Kissinger comes from. And we were married by the Bürgermeister, which is like the mayor, on January 10th, 1946.
Who wrote you Kasuba?
Kasuba, we had Noam after that, and somebody, a very learned man, he wrote the Kasuba.
What was his name?
Oh, no, wait a minute. No, he wrote the Noam. The Kasuba. I got married here in America, in Brooklyn. I got married, and I didn't come here as Mrs. I was still Miss.
What arrangements were made to bring you to the United States?
Well, the American government made the arrangements. I came here as a war bride on a small boat with 500 war brides from girls that married GIs in England and Holland, in Luxembourg, Belgium, and these Scandinavian countries. They married.
What percentage of these war brides were Jewish?
About 5 Jewish girls, between 500 war brides, okay? And there was one other one who was religious. She is a Hungarian girl, I mean Jewish Hungarian, and she married into Jewish Hungarian family. And we were the only ones that were not married, that were not, we were called Mrs., but we were not Mrs., because her boyfriend, her cousin, was also religious. And so there was that. Then I came to I came to this country on this boat, and I was deathly sick on the boat. We were 15 days on the boat, and there wasn't a moment that I felt good. And I think mainly it came from nervousness. I was extremely nervous because you have to understand that he was supposed to go to America, and his points were up. He had enough points to leave. This was after the war, to go home. But he was always a shrewdy. He arranged so that he stayed, and he made sure that I was on the way. So he took me, since there was no American consulate in Germany right after the war, only in Belgium. And so he took me to Belgium to my sister, and I was by my sister 5 or 6 weeks approximately, until I got papers, and he seen to it that I got a passport. And
When did you reach America?
I reached America in April 46.
When did you get married?
And I got married April 30th, 46.
Who came to the wedding?
Who came to the wedding? Some cousins that I found in my aunt, of course. My aunt and her uncle, and her husband was still alive.
What were their names?
And then I had another uncle,
What were their names?
Jacobs.
First names?
First name Joe Jacobs and Ida Jacobs, and Jack Teichman, who was my mother's youngest brother. And he was here, and he lost his wife in Auschwitz. Anyway, they came to our wedding, and I had a couple of cousins and their children. And then total strangers, my husband's acquaintances, and because there were only two, him and his sister. So there really was a very small family, but he wanted his mother to witness his wedding, and it was okay. So, and they were, well, anyway, my intended, comes to the boat, and I had no idea that he is here. In my mind, now wait a minute, I'm lost somewheres. He came to the boat, and I didn't know that his captain wanted him the heck out of Germany. He says, "What are you doing here? You were supposed to be in America already." And I thought I left him. He left me by my sister, and he went back to his outfit. And I left for America on the War Bride boat, and I come here, and he is by the boat. And that was such a surprise, I almost fell over. I didn't recognize him. He was in civilian clothing and a big gallant hat, like they wore in those days. And he brought me a corsage to the boat and a little heart.
Can you describe the meeting with his family?
Yes, I will be glad to, because they couldn't have been nicer. His sister, his late sister, she was an angel. She was so good-natured and so nice, and she treated me like a sister. And his mother was a lovely lady. She was very nice. I believe she was 59 years old at that time. And look, what she felt in her heart, I'm sure she would have liked her only son to marry an American girl and to have machatonim and so on and so forth. But they didn't show anything. They only showed niceness, and and they were happy that I was Jewish and religious, and look, it's his son, their son's life, whomever you chose, you know what I mean. But his sister was something special.
What was her name?
Miriam. That's why they called me Muncie, because we were both Miriams, and we lived in her house until we got an apartment for ourselves. And then we moved away 4 weeks after. No. He bought a business. He bought a store, a small store, a hardware business. And I went for a visit, 3 weeks visit to my aunt in Cleveland. They wanted me to come there. And I stayed 3 weeks, and they treated me royally, and people came to observe me, this phenomena of a girl just survived. They all had relatives in my town and the towns around, and these were my aunt's friends, and my aunt was very well off, and she had lots of friends, and they made parties, and don't ask, I was like on a merry-go-round over there, and it was lovely. And after 3 weeks, I came back, and and he already had rented an apartment on the 4th floor, all facing to the back, facing a big wall and no windows. But it was my home, and I kept it very clean. And a year and a half later, I had a baby, my daughter, who is 50 at this point.
What's her name?
Hindi. And my husband got sick. While I gave birth, my husband got sick. This was a very unfortunate thing. He got a nervous breakdown after all this. And while I was in the hospital in those days, you stayed 8 days in the hospital, and we used the same doctor. There's somebody who was a pediatrician and a gynecologist and a general practitioner, all those things. And he comes in the hospital, and he says to me, was your husband ever sick? He started questioning me about him. I says, no. I said, I don't know him that long. So he said, I don't know, he's not feeling well. He was like hinting, I don't think he really knew what was wrong with him, because in those days it wasn't so, how should I say, psychiatry and all that wasn't that popular, and maybe he knew what a nervous breakdown is. What did he do? We lived in this tiny apartment, and it was July, and he wanted to surprise me. He painted the kitchen walls. So he closed all the shades. It was summertime, so he didn't, on the 4th floor, there were windows on the other side. He was undressed, halfway, and he didn't want to be seen, so he closed the shades. And the paint, the smell of the paint somehow got to him. And he had a breakdown. Luckily, his mother was there. While I was in the hospital, his mother was there, and she witnessed everything. And after I came home from the hospital, he took off. He went to, his sister had already a children's camp they were running, and he went to his sister, and to be away mainly. And I was left alone with an infant and my mother-in-law and a sick husband, and I didn't know what was wrong with him. I too didn't know what a nervous breakdown is, because in concentration camp nobody got nervous breakdowns. After concentration camp they all got breakdowns, including myself, but none of them had it in camp. At least it wasn't obvious to anybody. Everybody wanted to survive. So anyway, after a week he came home, and this continued for quite a while. For at least a year he wasn't well. But after, we spent some of our savings that we had accumulated from the wedding gifts and whatever, and he didn't have any more money to pay doctors, and he met somebody. He says, why don't you go to the army? Why don't you go to, let them take care of you? You just came out of the 3.5 years in the army, and you were wounded, and let them take care of you. And that was a godsend. He was sent to a psychiatrist, and he went for at least a year, steady, twice a week, and eventually he became well. And we resumed our life as best we could. And money was scarce for quite a while because it was a tiny business with a partner and that he already had. And when he was sick, he couldn't tend to the business very well. And apparently everything affected him. Apparently it was too much for him. It reached like a pinnacle or whatever the word is, and he just broke down. So he, from then on, he got a small pension, and eventually his pension increased, and we lived in that tiny apartment 4 floors up for about 3 years, 2.5 rooms, and that's where my daughter was born. And then my family, when they came to America, everybody stayed with me in that apartment for a while, including my father, because he was in England over the war. He was stuck there, like I said. And after 3 some odd years, we bought a small house on the same block where his sister lived, but maybe just a little bit like a block further. And I was pregnant with my second one when we moved.
How many children do you have now?
I had 3 children. I have 2. We lost a son, unfortunately.
When was that?
There was in 90. He was born sickly, and eventually he passed away after a struggle of about almost 36 years. So life was bittersweet.
What was his name?
David.
How would you describe your religious life now?
I feel pretty spiritual, I think. I think I am, since I got married, I resumed religion, and I never gave up anything. So I think I'm religious. I felt in the beginning that my husband wasn't religious enough for me, and I kept on hounding him after we were married, and we used to have arguments over it. And then I decided that I'm not his mother. I didn't bring him up, and I could just do what I can do and leave well enough alone. And as the years went on, he became a little bit more spiritual too. I think it helped the fact that I didn't hound him. I decided not to do it. And that helped, because basically he has a religious upbringing, so it's not that I taught him anything. In fact, I learned a lot from him.
Were you able to provide a Jewish education for your children?
Well, we always sent them to yeshiva. And when they came home, they didn't see anything different at home than what they learned in yeshiva. So we never confused our children. Whenever we had an argument over religion, it was always in private. They never saw us, they never seen us argue in front, you know what I mean, in front of the children. They thought we had a rosy life forever. So we just left them thinking that way.
How do you feel your experiences affected your household?
I guess it was affected in some ways. I have no way of knowing, because if I would live with somebody else, then I would be able to tell how. I just cannot put my finger on what is different. I have certain rules, certain ideas, about kashrus, about different things, and I would never give up anything. I was never asked to give up anything. So at this point, I'm satisfied what my husband does. He enlightens me on a lot of things. In some ways, I have more experience. In other ways, he has more experience. So I hope we complement each other.
When were you able to discuss what had happened to you during the war? At what point in your life?
At one point, well, now I'm going to come to the trip that we took. About 4 years ago, I think almost 5 years ago, he says to me, there is such a thing as an organized trip, leaving every other year to Israel. This is prescribed mainly for teenagers, but adults can go also if they wish to. Every 2 years, a transport leaves for 2 weeks, a week in Poland and a week in Israel. After he heard of this trip, that he heard of somebody, a friend of his, that went, a younger man, he said to me once, you know what? He says, the trip is taking place next year. Maybe we should go. I says, what? I should go back to Auschwitz? I says, well, where I suffered so much and where I lost so much? I says, never. You know, like I put such a damper on it. But as time went, I thought to myself, it takes, he says, next year. He'll change his mind yet, you know. But a year is a long time. But he didn't change his mind. He kept on harping on it. Until I realized my husband is very strong-willed, much more than I am. I thought to myself, what if he tells you one day, if you don't want to go, I'm going? Because I know his type, he's capable of doing it. I didn't want it to come to that. I didn't want him to give me ultimatums. So I thought it over, and with great trepidation, with great reluctance, I decided that I'll join him. But what happened was that it made me so nervous that 2 weeks before the trip, I got physically very sick. I got gastritis. I remember 2 days before Pesach, and I work very hard when it comes for Pesach. My daughter was taking me to a specialist, to a gastroenterologist, and I was sick. But over Pesach, I relaxed, and I sort of, I was still sick, but I was getting better. So we left on this trip. But I just want to say that hindsight, I feel it's the best thing I ever did to myself. Because I just became different. I could never talk to 2 people. If there were 3 people, I was already nervous, shaky. It taught me how to talk because they made me speak whether I wanted or not. I was maybe one of 3 survivors that came along on the for 6,000 teenagers and their advisors and counselors. So they twisted my arm so that I had to, I mean not literally, figuratively, that I had to speak. And I was speaking from the heart, how I got there and what I did. And of course, it was a very difficult thing going to Auschwitz.
It's the end of our tape. This is tape 7 with Miriam Borenstein. It's March 25th, 1998.
We arrived to Auschwitz on a rainy day. As we are coming off the plane, there were buses, a whole row of buses waiting for us. Because as I said, we were about 6,000 there. And we were assigned to a bus, and the director, in fact, two of the people, but especially one, this Rabbi Dr. Well, very learned individual, and he's been on this trip before. See, I think he knows every rock in Auschwitz, or I should say in Israel also. We were sitting on the bus. You have to understand that I wasn't feeling well yet, and sitting on the bus tired, I closed my eyes and I thought to myself, I want to relax a little bit. We just got off the plane. You know, flying 7 hours is also no joke. So he comes over to me and he says, Mrs. Borenstein, would you like to say something to the teenagers? Here's a full bus of teenagers, I don't know, anywhere from 25 to 30 girls. So I said to him, I says, I cannot speak, I'm too tired. And first of all, I didn't expect to speak. I didn't think they'll make such good use out of me. I says, I know. I says, I don't want to speak and I'm tired. So I says, maybe tomorrow. But he wouldn't take no for an answer.
What was the background of these girls?
All American girls from their boobies and zadis are refugees. They're Holocaust survivors, just like myself. They didn't come on the trip. I came on the trip. They admired me greatly. I came on the trip. They didn't know how sick I was, and still. So anyway, I had to consent to, I was sitting in the front like with my husband, and I stood up. So I went on the back of the bus. You know, there was this big rod. I was holding onto the rod with the mic in my other hand. He's, describe your trip a little bit, he says, coming here to Auschwitz. So I thought to myself, where do I begin? What should I say? So immediately it occurred to me, I said, you know, I said, when I came to Auschwitz, I says, I didn't come on a shiny plane, on an El Al plane. I says, that's not the way I came to Auschwitz. And I went on to describe a little bit how I did come to Auschwitz. I came with my mother and so on and so forth. You know, the girls, they were eating up every word. I could see them looking at me. And I talked for a while, but I was also very nervous. I'm not used to public speaking. To me, that was public speaking. And that was that. But from that day on, every bus, I don't know how many buses there were. We were about 2,000 or something. Every bus wanted me to speak. Oh, I thought to myself, oh my God, what did I get into? I said, I don't, but you have to. I says, listen, I'm not in concentration camp. I says, I don't have to do anything, only if I want to. I said, oh, please, please, please. So I went around talking from bus to bus and describing my experience. And that was, where were we at that point?
How long a ride was this from the airport?
A short ride. It wasn't a long ride from the airport.
What did you see first as you approached the camp?
Let me think. I have to get my train of thoughts together. You know, I lost my train of thought. What was I saying before?
But going from bus to bus.
Yes, from bus to bus, they wanted me to speak. Mrs. Borenstein, would you please speak on our bus? Mrs. Borenstein, would you please speak on our bus? I says, listen, I says, I'm all talked out already. But I tried to do the best I could. And they were very happy, the kids were very happy that I spoke to them, and let's see, where were we next? You know, I lost my train of thoughts right now. This was in Israel. This was in Israel that I went around speaking on the buses.
What about as you approached Auschwitz?
as I approached Auschwitz, it was very, very difficult for me. It was extremely difficult. I was crying. I was emotional. I didn't know myself how to react. It was just, maybe we could pass by Auschwitz. Could we?
How do you spend your time now?
How do I spend my time now? I have to think how I spend my time now. I don't know, I think something's happening to me.
Do you ever have any dreams or nightmares now?
Yes, I have dreams, I have nightmares, all kinds of, I don't know.
What do you dream about?
I dream about camp. I dream about my parents.
How do you picture them?
How do I picture them? You know, I feel I can't talk anymore.
We're continuing tape 7 now.
Okay, I just want to tell my feelings as I was approaching Auschwitz. From the town of Auschwitz to the camps of Auschwitz is about 2 or 3 miles, I think.
Do people live in that distance?
Sure. I had no idea. When I was in Auschwitz, I had no idea how close they lived. And they probably saw everything what's going on. And we were not aware of it because we were between barracks and wires, and barracks and wires. We couldn't see a thing for miles and miles away. But they were real close, and probably seeing the smoke coming out of the chimneys and everything. They saw it. We weren't aware of what that was for. And as we were marching, I was getting more and more nervous. My hands and legs were shaking, and I don't know what I expected to see there. I knew I'm not going to meet my mother, and I just felt that I'm going to visit her ashes. I'm going for Kaivaruvas. And that's why all that made me so nervous. Then we come to Auschwitz. What do I see? Nothing. Zilch. I see a few barracks standing there yet, and I see the crematoria, lots, not half, they're mostly down and half up, one part of it up, and nothing. And I say to myself, what did you get so nervous about? Well, saying it and feeling it are 2 different things. We came closer, and we lit some candles. And of course, I was crying. I was, upset, to say the least. And we walked around looking, and everybody, I felt like everybody's eyes were upon me, because I was in this particular group. I was the only survivor. So everybody wanted to see my reaction. I don't know what they expected. Maybe I should have passed out there or something. Maybe I felt like passing out, but I didn't. And at one point I asked, we had 2 or 3 official photographers with us. And one in particular was taking so many pictures. So I said to him, I says, how come you're taking so much pictures of me? I just felt that he's constantly flashing his lights. So so he says, I was told to photograph your reactions of this place. So my husband said Kaddish there, and I cried a little bit more, but basically I was under pretty good control. If the photographer expected something else, probably disappointed.
Did you go back to the train tracks in Auschwitz?
Of course, they're right there. You can't miss them. They're like all around. And after that, the kids were following me like a rabbi, and everybody was asking questions.
What did they ask?
Yeah, I know how it happened actually. I came into one of the barracks that is still standing, and one of the guides was telling the kids, these teenagers, when I say kids, I mean teenagers that were there, the stories, you know, how it happened and what had happened. And what I was hearing, I felt he's not telling the way it was. You know, so I corrected him right there and then. So some of the kids asked me, well, how do you know? I says, because I was here. I says, I'm a Holocaust survivor. Oh, that's all they had to hear. I didn't realize what I said. I just wanted to verify why I was so maybe rude even.
Do you remember that point of misinformation?
No, unfortunately, I don't remember. Maybe it'll come to me, but at this point, I don't. I just knew that I wanted to correct him so everybody should hear. And once they heard that I was a survivor, well, I opened a can of worms. Well, not exactly worms. They were hounding me. But once we walked out of the barrack, they were like after a rabbi, you know, when they walk after a rabbi. Mrs. Bornstein, well, was it this way? Was it that way? And tell me, and like it went on and on and on. I says, kids, I says, please, I says, one at a time. I says, I cannot answer all your questions at once. I says, I'll answer as much as I can and as much as I can remember, but talk to me one at once. I mean, one at a time. So they tried. They didn't always succeed, but they tried to, I touched this, to ask me, and I tried to answer them as best I could. I answered every question that they asked me. And it was an extremely draining day for me, very, very draining. By the time it was all over, I was really pooped. I came into the bus when we were going back, and I just slept. But from that day on, I became a celebrity to them, you know what I mean? They were just trying to get me and question me, to corner me whenever they could. Or where was this? I forgot already. Where one of the bus directors, you know, every bus had psychologists, and I mean, there had to be people that has seen that things, you know, go in order. And besides, some girls became hysterical, so the psychologist had to take over and calm them, and so on. So one of the, I think this was in Israel already, one of the counselors says to me, well, Mrs. Bornstein, I would like you to speak on my bus. So I said, well, I don't know, when would you like, you know, but she says it with such authority, like, I says, wait a minute, I says, you probably are mistaking me with the staff. I says, I am not one of the staff. I says, I am a paid up passenger on this here trip. So, oh no, she like apologized, you know, no, but please, will you please talk on my bus? So I did that afternoon. I remember speaking on her bus, and this is the way it went on from bus to bus. Everybody wanted me on their bus. Well, actually, this started already in New York. One of the counselors said she was a friend of my granddaughter, that or her teacher, I think it was. Yes, her teacher. She, oh, Amy, I want your grandparents. I want them on my bus. I want them, and she came over to me. Please, you'll be on my bus. So I already realized they have an ulterior motive why she wants me on her bus. Okay, so this was also very draining because it's, you know, constant, and it's also repetitious because how many times can I say the same thing, you know? So I had to rack my brains and think of something else that happened to tell them, and so on and so forth. And that's how I became their celebrity on the way back. Once we were standing in line already in Kennedy, in the station, in Kennedy Airport, and they we needed to pay for something. I forgot already what it was. Some change, 50 cents, a dollar or something. So lo and behold, somebody from the back says, "Oh, Mr. Bornstein, I have the money. I have the money." I look at her. But obviously she must have heard us speak, me in particular. So like that. And when I spoke in New York, I spoke for a while. Then I put on my husband. I figured let him take over, and he did. And the boss too. The very first time when I was very nervous, I told you my legs were shaking, my hands and everything. And after I spoke for about 10 minutes or so, I says, and I says, my husband, I says, is a liberator. I says, would you like to hear him? So all hands went, yay, you know. Okay, thank God. Now I can sit down and let him take over. And so he did, and he spoke to them for a while also. And that was my experience.
Would you like to tell us about your dreams and nightmares?
My dreams and nightmares are repetitious many times. I dream that they're taking us from home. And it's not just the dreams, but I get the same emotions in my dreams. I get the sad emotions, and I want to cry. Not really, it's amazing. When you're in so much fear, somehow you can't cry. So I basically feel like I'm leaving town and I'll never see it again, and where am I going? You know, these dreams come back to me, and somehow in between, my husband also gets mixed up. You know what I mean? Like my life is this mumbo jumbo. So, and then here I have children already. Like, I mean, when I went to Auschwitz the first time in '44, I was a young girl. I didn't have children. Then, when I'm going now, I already have children and I have a family. That's a different feeling altogether. So those are basically my nightmares.
Did you ever question the existence of God?
No. Emphatically, no.
Did you ever witness any miracles?
Probably yes. Probably yes, but I can't think of them right now. I just somehow like I have a blank.
Is there a single memory of the Holocaust that disturbs you or haunts you?
The whole thing disturbs me and haunts me. It probably will till the rest of my days. I never got over it, really. It's something, you know, when I at one point I got a little bit of a breakdown before we moved here. I guess it was too much to move to a new community and moving away from familiar surroundings, and plus the Holocaust, I suppose. And I got a little bit of a nervous breakdown. But what was I want to say? I wanted to say something. And what was your question?
There was a single thought of the Holocaust that haunts you.
Well, like I said, just everything haunts me about the Holocaust. Oh yeah, now I know what I wanted to say. When I was living in America for a short while, and I read about swastikas and synagogues, some synagogues being demolished or whatever. These things haunt me so much that I think around that time I got my breakdown because the whole scenario comes back to me, and I say to myself, there but for the grace of God go we again, not I, we. And I am very disturbed and perturbed that this is happening all again. But I got used to it because I'm living here a long time, and I realized that it's happening and it's going to happen, and anti-Semitism isn't dead by no means. And you just go between between the lines or whatever. I don't know. Just go on living. That's all as best you can.
What gave you the strength to survive?
I don't think I had more strength than anybody else. I doubt that. When I was in Auschwitz, I didn't think about. I was just existing. I didn't think about a future because I didn't think I have a future. So I just existed, and I did what they told me to do, and that's all. When they yelled, "Sail up, pal," everybody up, out. So I went with 1,200 others. That's all, like a robot. But I don't think I had more strength than anybody else. I don't know. I'm a believer. I believe I had very righteous parents, especially my father. I believe somehow, somewheres, he prayed for us because all my siblings survived, except my brother's wife with 4 children. They did not survive. So I don't know. I didn't have more strength than anybody else. It was Bashet. I believe in Bashet. I met my husband. I believe it was Bashet. I mean, somehow I was singled out.
In time, how would you want to be remembered?
Oh, this is something I never thought of, because who would remember me? I don't know. Maybe my children, but I don't know. Who's going to remember me? There lived the Miriam Borenstein, so big deal.
What advice do you have for your children?
Well, my advice to them is they should be good people. They should love humanity, and they should love the Torah, and they should be good Jews. I mean, I assume every mother wants this for their children. And I would like them to think good of me, but I don't know. Listen, I had, like I told you, my life was bittersweet because we had we lost a son, and he struggled, and we watched him struggle, and so it affected us, it affected our lives, and it affected my living children. And this is something that I lament over very much. Other than that,
What message would you now like to deliver to the world?
oh, to the world. Well, my message is basically the same, that humanity should change a little bit, that they shouldn't hate us as much as they do. I mean, how did we come to all this? Something brought it on. It's all the generations of hating. But I don't think I'll ever stop. I'm old enough to realize that I'll never stop. Listen, some people could never change my mind over something. We'll never change their minds over. It's so embedded in the nations that they hate us. They don't even know us, and they hate us. There are so many countries that don't have any Jews anymore, yet they have a bad word to say about the Jews. And why? What I just want to say something about the Holocaust when I was in Poland the last time. There was, you know, like I said, there were 6,000 teenagers, and they all had their counselors and their interpreters and their whatever else. And they have guides, these Polish men, women as guides. And I came in one of the houses. These structures are there. They were housing Polish officers in the war. When Auschwitz was taken over by the Germans, naturally, they took these buildings to themselves, for themselves. And, but at this point, these buildings are museums, and some of the buildings still have the first crematoria, the very first. They started out small until they spread themselves out. Okay, so we went to all these places, upstairs, downstairs, and like I said, it's mostly a museum now. And of course, the Polish people benefit indirectly. People spend money when they come to their country, something they don't deserve. And the Polish guides are taking our people and showing them around. And I somehow separated myself from the group, and I went into a separate room. It's like room after room after room. And I see there's this Polish woman guide, a middle-aged woman, well-dressed, and speaks fairly good English. And she is describing what happened and how it happened and this and that. So I raise my hand and I say, I don't know how I got this nerve. Is he finished? I raise my hand and say, I have a question for you. And she turns around. She wants to see who wants to ask a question. And I say, and everybody else, there's suddenly 1,000 eyes upon me. And I say to her, I would like to know if you could answer, why were the biggest crematoria and the biggest killing places, I mean, killing machines, I said to her, happened right here on Polish soil? I says, how could that be that right here in your homeland this happened? So she looks at me. She was a little bit startled, and she says, we were occupied. We also suffered, she says, and there were a lot of Polish prisoners in the camps here in Auschwitz, in Oświęcim, you know. In Polish, it's Oświęcim. And she says, and we suffered too. I says, yes. I says, it's true. I says, I'm a survivor, and I saw some of your people here in the concentration camp. I says, but you know why your people were there? Because they were political. That's why. I says, the Jews were not political, I says. We were brought here mainly because we were Jewish. We are Jewish, and were. I says, that's why.
That's the end of our tape. This is tape 8. We're with Miriam Borenstein, and it's March 25th, 1998.
Anyway, after I finished my little speech with her, she beyond telling me that they had problems also and so on, she didn't have any answers, of course, and I really didn't expect any answers from her, because what can she say? She probably was born after the war. And people, after it was finished, you know, outside people came over to me. Oh, I was so proud of you. Oh, how could you, and where did you get the nerve to speak up? I says, I don't know. I says, I'm getting old. The older they get, the more nerve you get, you know. Years ago, I could never have stood up, you know. There was a full room, a large room, you know, with pictures and everything, her pointing and everything. Then, like I said, it was over, and I was glad that I told her. And I was actually proud of myself that I had the guts to speak up. Not that it did me any good or anybody else, but from there they called on me to speak in different gatherings at the trip in Israel and well, first in Poland and then in Israel, and I did my best, and I hope I did my best and tried, and I was glad that I did it.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Wait, I'm watching.
Where do
Could
I
you tell us
start?
about this picture?
Well, the first one is my mother, our mother there.
What was her name?
Hinda, one name.
And who else?
She's holding me. Next is my brother. He was the oldest,
What was his name?
Shmuel, or Shmuel. And in the middle is my sister Sarah. Next to her is her twin Rachel.
Where
And
was
that's
this?
it. And this was somewheres in a studio, as I can imagine, because those flowers probably were given by a photographer, and
Where was your father at this time?
I would not know. I wouldn't know. I never remember asking my mother. Okay. My husband,
What's his name?
Irving Borenstein. My father,
His name, please.
Shimon David, he was called by
His last name?
everybody, David Hoffman, and me, Miriam Hoffman Borenstein, at this point, pregnant with my second child. And that's it. You want me to say something about my father? My father was caught in the war in England. He lived in London. And after the war, we brought him out here. And he lived with us for 3 years. He was a Sakmar Chassid. And one night in March, Shabbos night, Saturday night, he went to a Malava Malka, to the Rebbe, to the Sakmar Rebbe. And on the way home, he got killed by a city bus. He got off the bus, I imagine. Not imagine, but somebody said there was a witness. Rolka was there? Said that the bus backed up and ran over him. But he didn't die immediately. He died in this was Saturday night. He died Sunday afternoon the next day. He passed away. He was that badly hurt. Should I talk? Yeah, okay. On the left, there is a couple there. They are not married to each other. She was married before the war, and I think she had a child. I'm not all that sure about that, but there she is. And that they're from Poland, and that's a friend standing there with his arm around her. And then is me, and then is a young boy that survived the war. I don't remember where he is from. The girl is a niece to the one on the left, and the one on the side is also a friend of the one that I couldn't recognize. They're two friends. I don't know, maybe they were their friends that they came into the picture. I'm not sure, but we were all friends.
Where was
and
this?
and I told you that I didn't want to. This was in Fürth, and I didn't want to live alone in the house in Fürth. So I brought the woman on the left,
What's her name?
Rena, and the girl is her niece, Franja. They took one room, and I had one room. So this way, I wasn't living alone. And then later on, I brought my girlfriend with me, that's Sarah Schaefer, that was mentioned earlier. This is actually on the way to America. Hooray. I lived in Brussels by my sister for about 5 or 6 weeks, I forgot which. And this were my first real clothes after liberation. Had a new hat, and my husband then to be bought me this leather jacket, and I was wearing a skirt, and I think I also had a fur coat, some kind of horse from a horse. And as you could see, I have some luggage with me there, and I was meeting the 500 war brides. I was meeting them in a hotel where I was one of them after I got there. But this is on the way from my sister's house in Brussels to the hotel on the way to France, actually. Okay, this is me right after the war, smack after I was liberated, I should say.
Who took the photo?
I don't. One of, you know, I was always with a bunch of men and women. You know, wherever we went together. We had a lot in common, and so somebody snapped this picture that I didn't even. This is my first real clothing, what I'm wearing there, like a blouse with a kimono. I don't know where I got it and how I got it. I just got it because I had. That's Esther, and the fella in the middle is Abrashka. He came originally from Lithuania, and Miriam Hoffman from Czechoslovakia. Okay, that's our marriage license, and we got married legally in Germany in the town of Fürth. Irving Borenstein, my fiance at that time, and me, Miriam Borenstein. This is the passport I had to have before I came to this country. We had a hard time getting it, but on the end we did get it. And that was my, my passport to America. This is Miriam Borenstein, the bride, me, and my groom, Irving Borenstein, an American.
Where was this photo taken?
The envy of all my friends.
Where was this taken?
In a studio somewhere in Brooklyn near Prospect Park. That's where his sister lived. This is our tuba, or ksuba, as they call it over here. I forgot who wrote it. Oh, Rabbi Weiss wrote this ksuba, yes. From the left is my son-in-law's daughter from his first marriage, our late son, David. My son, my married son, Avi Borenstein, his wife Sharon, my daughter Hindi, or our daughter Hindi, our son-in-law, my daughter's son from her first marriage. Then on the bottom is our grandson Alec, me, my husband, Amanda, our granddaughter, and Amy, our oldest granddaughter.
Thank you.
She said she's the youngest.